Okay, and I want to overview the last third of the book, God is on Your Side. Beginning with chapter 9, Open Your Eyes, When You Can't See Meaning or Purpose. Now this chapter is based off the story of Jesus healing the man born blind. In this chapter, I share some of my own story of going blind in my right eye, and then a whole year where the doctors were concerned I was also going blind in my left eye as well. And I talk about, the fear of facing this prospect of what if I'm not going to be able to see my kids' faces as they grow up? Or what if I'm not going to be able to read and write the way that I'm used to? And yet, the power of Christ encountering us, even in those times where we're not sure what's going on and we're trying to figure it out. Now, in this chapter, I also talk about the power of sharing our testimony. This man's testimony is simply, I once was blind, but now I see. And similarly, in our lives, there's a power when we share our testimony of how Christ has encountered us in our difficult spots, in the hard moments of our life, and how simple that can be. Okay, well, chapter 10 is then called Discover Your Defender, when they should have protected you but didn't. This chapter gets into more how do we navigate dealing with church hurt, right? Because the shepherd, we can think of it as just like kind of some dude out in a field, but throughout the Bible, shepherds are images for leaders, like kings. And so in the Old Testament, the shepherd imagery is used a lot for kings, where if the role of king, the name of king, speaks to the position of a ruler, the title of shepherd speaks to their posture that they're supposed to have as a ruler, right? That as leaders and rulers, the posture that we're called to is to serve, to care for, to provide, to guide, to guard, to protect, and all. And yet, sometimes leaders can misuse their power for selfish reasons rather than good ones. And so a powerful Old Testament backdrop here comes in Ezekiel chapter 34, where God confronts the bad shepherds of his people going, the leaders of Israel at the time, he's going, you only use the sheep, you only care about yourself, and you misuse and hurt and mistreat the sheep. And yet God gives good news going, he calls out the evil and injustice of what they've done, but he also says that I myself will come and will shepherd the flock as a good shepherd. And what we find in Christ is that was what God has done. He has come in Christ as the good shepherd to heal and redeem and restore. And so I talk about what it looks like to take our wounds from the church. There's times I felt really wounded by leaders in my life, by church hurt, but being able to take that and rather than to grow cynical and hardened and cold, but rather to be able to name the evil that was done to us, like hearing Christ name it for us and validating that, but also bringing it to him so that we can experience his good shepherding and leading and healing us back within the flock of the people of God. Okay, well, chapter 11 is then called Walk Free, when your mind is a prison. And here I look at the story of Barabbas, a criminal who's on death row, and Jesus gets exchanged for Barabbas as Barabbas is set free and Jesus goes to the cross instead. Now, there's some powerful imagery going on here where Barabbas is, in many ways, he's a picture of us. Barabbas is a rebel and Jesus is the king. And so Jesus is the king being exchanged for a rebel. Barabbas is also guilty and Jesus is the innocent one. Barabbas is also a son of the Father. His name means son of the Father. Bar is son, Abbas is father. And what we find in John's gospel is that Jesus is the true son of the Father. Throughout John's gospel, that's his primary identity, as the son of the Father. So what we see is we are Barabbas. Barabbas is, yes, he's an individual, but he's also a representative for all of us, that at the cross, Jesus is the king exchanged for us as rebels. He is the innocent one exchanged for us as the guilty, and he is the true son of the Father exchanged for us as estranged sons and daughters of the Father, so that we could be welcomed back in, brought back into the family of God as children of God. Okay, and chapter 12 is then called Anticipate Surprise When It Hurts to Hope. And this chapter is focused on Mary's encounter of Jesus in the garden after the resurrection. And there's an interesting Old Testament backdrop here where there are there's an angel at the head and another angel at the foot of the tomb. And this echoes the Old Testament where the angels at the head and the foot of the Ark of the Covenant in the holiest place. And the imagery or picture here is that now Jesus' victory has become like a new Holy of Holies from which the presence of God is moving out from to reconcile and restore creation to himself again. And we see here how Jesus, like Mary, you can go to the hardest places of wounds and hurt, the scary places. She's going back to the tomb, to the greatest image of grief and loss in her life. Jesus can guide you back into those own places in your own life And yet you can anticipate surprise as you go there to actually encounter Jesus in the dark areas of your life where he wants to bring the surprise of new life, of new creation, of new hope in your life. Okay, final chapter, 13, change the world. When your past seems bigger than your future. And this focuses on Peter's encounter with the resurrected Jesus, where Jesus walks Peter back into some painful memories of his life. First, he walks him back into a calling that he thinks that he lost, recreating the scene of a miraculous catch of fish where Jesus first called Peter earlier in his life. Jesus also walks him back into Peter's failure with the charcoal fire, which was the same image as the place where Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Yet Jesus walks him back into those memories, not to shame him, not to guilt him, but ultimately to restore and to heal him and to restore his calling into a greater future. And similarly, Jesus can walk you back into your painful memories, back into the difficult and hard places of your life, in order not to shame you or to guilt you, but to bring healing and restoration. And you may feel like your best days are behind you, but in the gospel, Jesus says he has a future for you that's bigger than your past, that he wants to meet you in and call you into. Okay, finally, the conclusion to the book is called Be the Beloved. This is where I look at John's identification of himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. When this is the greatest takeaway he had after encountering Jesus, walking with Jesus, the biggest takeaway was not in his own accomplishments and his own things that John himself had done. It was rather in knowing himself as loved by God. And your greatest legacy can be knowing yourself as one loved by God. Not just knowing it in your head, but knowing it in your heart, in your experience, in your life, in your bones. Knowing yourself as one who is loved by God, the God who is on your side, who is in it with you, who is fighting for you, who wants to work in you and through you for your good and call you into a meaning and a purpose that can transform the world. Okay, so that's the summary of the book. God is on your side, how Jesus is for you when everything seems against you. Hope you check it out, and yeah, take care.